Today's episode is for anyone who has ever had to start all over. Not necessarily because you wanted to, but because life forced you to start all over. Situations that you had to go through actually forced you, or maybe you are at the verge of having to start over and you're second guessing yourself if you should or if you shouldn't start all over. Maybe it was a failed relationship, failed business, or just a version of yourself that you feel you are not in alignment with your purpose, or you're not in alignment with what you want to do and who you actually want to become, to the extent where you just want a new start. You see, we live in a world that glorifies progress and does not give people any sort of grace. But today I want you to understand the art of starting all over without shame, and why this is very, very important. Let's be honest, when things fall apart, the loudest voice you hear is not always critic from outside. It's the inner man, the inner voice which tells you, yeah, you failed again. You should have known better. You should have saved more. You should have seen this coming. But here's the truth. You did the best you could with what you had. So let's begin with this. Shame is one of the most misunderstood emotions. Psychologists even explain this or describe shame as an emotion that makes you feel like I am bad instead of I did something bad. And that tiny bit of difference is very, very critical to not only how you see yourself, not only how you put yourself out there, but how you live life moving forward. That's why when you experience failure, your mind doesn't say, this didn't work. It actually says, I didn't work. And that's a trap. It's the reason why so many people stay in broken relationships, broken marriages, unfulfilling jobs, and overall old versions of themselves, simply because the moment they try to start all over, they start thinking, what are people gonna say? They're gonna think I'm not consistent. But here's the irony. Growth requires inconsistency with your previous self, because you cannot become who you are meant to be if you remain loyal to the person you were. Research from Dr. Brené Brown, one of the leading voices when it comes to shame, reveals that shame thrives in silence and secrecy, which simply means that the more you hide those things, the more the shame grows. So the only thing that can dismantle shame is honesty and empathy, which simply means that the moment you tell yourself I am allowed to start all over, I'm allowed to begin again, is the moment you starve shame of its power. Let's take, for example, a snake. Every now and then, snakes do shed their shells. Not because the old one is bad, but because it no longer fits. Just imagine if that snake was ashamed of outgrowing itself. It would die in the shell that once served it. And that's how so many of us live in jobs, relationships, and identities that have expired. But starting all over is simply shedding what no longer supports your next level. I know I talk about neuroplasticity a lot, but neuroscience actually supports this. When you start all over, move into a new city, get into a new relationship, rebuild your life, your brain enters what is called neuroplastic adaptation. And this simply means that your brain starts naturally creating new pathways, literally rewiring your brain to think and respond. So yes, starting all over might be uncomfortable, but biologically, it's considered as a sign of growth. And every time you try something new, you activate the part of your brain which is responsible for learning from errors. So in other words, your brain actually gets better at beginning all over again. And that's not failure. It's actually growth. It's actually evolution. As adults, we've completely stopped to give ourselves grace. But here's a truth worth writing down. Starting over is not regression. It is recalibration. You are not losing ground, you are finding alignment. One of the biggest reasons why people are reluctant to start all over is because of the fear of being behind. Society has put the idea in our heads that success is linear. Graduate at 22, get married by 27, and become a millionaire by 30. But life does not respond to man-made timelines. It actually responds to alignment. A Harvard Business Review article found out that people who transition into new careers and new life paths after 30 actually achieve more long-term fulfillment because their decisions are rooted in clarity rather than conformity. So maybe you are at that stage in your life where you think everyone else have gone ahead of you, everyone else have their lives figured out, and you're just stagnant, you're not moving, you feel lost. Let me tell you something. Comparison is something that will make you feel lost even when you are exactly where you are supposed to be. And if you truly understand how much is being refined and redesigned behind the scene, you will thank God for every detour. So now let's be practical. How do you start all over again without shame? How do you rise again without feeling like you lost everything? Let me share with you 4 principles that have changed everything for me, and 4 principles I've learned from people who have had to rebuild themselves from scratch. The first thing is accept what has ended and don't argue with closure. Psychologists call this radical acceptance, which simply means that you stop wishing things did not happen the way they happened. You stop wishing the past had gone differently, and you start focusing on what is and what you can make of it. You cannot heal a version of your life that does not even exist anymore. So at this point, you should sit down and think to yourself, be brutal, and name that situation. The business did not work out. I got the lowest grade in my class. That project failed. And naming the truth doesn't make you weak. It actually makes you learn more about your direction, because you cannot use a navigation map that belongs to another journey. The second thing is forgive yourself for not knowing sooner. We often forgive other people and give other people more grace than we even give ourselves. But you need to understand that every decision that you make is based on the information that you have at hand. People who forgive themselves after failure recover motivation a lot faster and are 40% more likely to try again. So stop punishing yourself for being human, because you can't grow when you're still on trial. Next thing you're going to do is rebuild with rhythm and not rush. And this is where a lot of people go wrong, because when they try again, they want it to go so fast. They try to use a new life to erase old pain. But healing does not happen like that. Healing actually happens in rhythm. Consistency is able to heal what intensity cannot. And that's why I said in my previous episode that talent without consistency is wasted potential. Because even if you decide to try again and you're the most talented person, if you're not consistent enough, you are far away from growth, because growth will come from being consistent in rebuilding. You don't need to sprint, you just need to sustain. And the last principle is you need to redefine what success means to you. When you start over, you want to make sure that every single thing that broke you and is the reason why you failed is redefined. You want to make sure you don't look at those things the same way you used to look at them before. So maybe success used to mean to you that people see you as winning, but now success needs to mean I can sleep peacefully, because success isn't always louder. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's replacing pressure with peace. Here's something I want you to reflect on. You cannot start over if your life is still living in the old story, because every ending leaves emotional residue. And if you don't detox from it, you're bringing that energy into your new beginning. So here's an exercise for you. You're going to take some time and sit down, Take away every distraction. Don't sit down in front of a TV. Put your phone aside and take a book and take a pen. Reflect on your life. What is it that you consider failure? What is it that did not work out? You're going to write down what did not work out. You're also going to write down, according to you, why it did not work out. And then you're going to write down what this experience has taught you. This is going to teach you that what broke you also built you. Helps your mind stop looping in shame. Because when you give pain a meaning, it loses control. Now let's talk about what happens after you let go. When you've forgiven yourself, when you've accepted your failures, and when you've decided to try again. This is where the art of starting over comes in. Every great comeback begins with curiosity. What would happen if I stopped trying to fix the old story and start writing a new one? Who could I be if I stopped apologizing for evolving? You need to understand that this time around, you're not starting from zero. You're starting from experience. That's like playing a video game from level 1 with the wisdom and knowledge of level 10. It always comes easier. One of my new favorite concepts is post-traumatic growth. It's the idea that some people don't only recover from loss, they actually transform. Their empathy deepens, their vision sharpens, and their purpose becomes even clearer. So if you've lost something, I want you to remember this. Loss doesn't mean lack. Sometimes it's just life creating space for alignment. Because you can't fill a cup that is already full, even if it's with the wrong content. So sometimes it's okay to let what you lost be lost, because that's the only way you're going to understand how to rebuild yourself. I want you to learn how to reconnect yourself with hope, because hope is oxygen for new beginning. But you need to understand that hope is not just by wishing. You cannot just wish and it happens. It is built through small evidence. It doesn't have to be big, just small evidence, small effort, just a little bit of effort, a little bit of consistency, a little bit of rhythm. And science calls it the progress principle. The idea that humans are motivated not by the huge wins, but by the little, small, tiny progress. Did you show up today? That counts. Did you take one step towards the things you've been afraid to do? That counts. Because confidence does not come from perfection. It comes from proof. And the more evidence that you build that you can trust yourself again, the less room shame has to speak. Starting over without shame is looking at your past as a chapter and not a cage. It means walking away from what has ended, not bitter, but better. It means releasing timelines, building slowly, and choosing peace over performance. So you're not broken for starting over. You're instead brave for doing it consistently. And if you feel like you don't know how to be consistent and what consistency does for you, go back and listen to my episode on talent without consistency is wasted potential. This is going to give you an insight to the importance of consistency. Don't forget that you do not need to prove that you're changing or that you've changed. You just need to become the change. So thank you for listening and watching this episode of In Essence. And if this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to start over again and who is reluctant to start over again. Just give them a boost of encouragement and let them know that starting over is not a setback. It's actually a sign of growth.